Hi guys. So tonight we're going to do a bit of a session working on some foundations and fundamental movements to get you guys back on court and hopefully reduce any injury risk, like Lee said. So we'll get going. We're going to start with a nice quick warm up. We're going to do some jogging on the court, but at home, if you aren't on the court, you can jog on the spot or you can skip. But the first thing we're going to do, we're going to jog around. We're going to go for 30 seconds. So are you ready? Let's get going. Saran's going to start. So let's go. Good. Keeping it nice and easy as the first part of it. 15 down.
So this is just your pulse raiser, is it, Nathan, just to get the heart going?
Yeah, we're just going to get ourselves warm, get the blood flowing around the body, start loosening up the muscles, and just getting ready for the exercise for the session, really. Okay, we'll hold it there. We're going to move on to another warm-up exercise, which is going to bring in a bit of mobility work as well. So we call this crawling or bear crawls. So Saran's going to go on her hands and feet. Key thing to think about here is keeping our hips nice and low and in line with our shoulders. So don't let your hips fly up in the air. And she's going to walk on her hands and feet with her knees coming towards her elbow across the court.
What does this help you with, Nathan? What does this give you?
So there's a few things. Obviously working a bit as a warm-up, so it keeps you moving as well. But also we're looking at hip mobility. We're looking at shoulder mobility and stability. You can see with Saran, she's able to keep her hips nice and level whilst doing this, which means she's got really good glute control and controlling her hip movements. She could probably, at the next time, go a bit longer with the stride so she can start opening up that hip a little bit more. We're going to do a fair bit on glute work today and a lot of movement around those hips. So we just want to get them nice and warm and loose.
I reckon everyone's hips have only just, and glutes have only just recovered from Laura's session on Thursday.
Yeah, with glutes take a hit when it comes to squash, as all the players keep telling me. Squash bum is a real thing. So we're going to go jump back onto the jogging. So we're going to alternate these two exercises. So another 30 seconds on jogging. This time we'll start building the pace up a little bit. As you go through a warm up, we want to start like ramping the intensity up progressively as you go through. So it keeps working those muscles at a high intensity. Gets the blood flowing a little bit more, gets the heart pumping a little bit faster.
So would you adjust this, Nathan, depending on how advanced you are or how used to it you are? Because you obviously, if you were going to play, you wouldn't necessarily want to really wear yourself out, would you?
And we'll just hold it there. I'll drop back into the crawling. I think, to be honest, when it comes to if you're playing with a warm-up, you want to be able to get almost up to, if not to match intensity for a short period of time. What you don't want to do is your first rally on court in a match to be a shock to the system, because usually that's when the body doesn't react very well. Either it could lead to injury or you just absolutely gas for those first couple of points. So we'd progress it all the way up to the point where that final pass of the warm-up would be at match intensity. We call it, when we go through a warm-up, we call it like specificity really, or in that sort of side of it, or performance as well. So yeah, I think we're going fairly steady today because the intensity of the session is not going to be too hard. But when you go into a match, the last part of your warm-up wants to be close to match intensity, to be honest. If we want to make this a little bit more challenging, turn back round and try and come backwards. This will challenge your coordination a little bit more as well. As part of a warm-up, you want to start to help switch your mind on as well as your body. So if we can give it a few little challenges, that'll be good. We'll go once more, there and back.
So and then also don't be too worried about being too tired or getting yourself up to that point, because quite often you could just be getting rid of nervous energy and just sort of getting rid of those initial cobwebs, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think with a number of our top players have commented before that they probably haven't gone as hard in a warm up, and then they haven't felt at that's like at the level yet on the first couple of points. Whereas if you go hard, you're then going to walk off, you're grabbing a drink, your heart rate's going to start settling down, and then you'll be ready to go on the first point. So your heart rate never shoots up and just stays up in that warm up, and you're not going to go on court and just be flying flying around too hard. So that should be good. We're going to take it a little bit steadier now and go into a bit of a mobility work. So I call these, well, technically I'm going to be supine, but you're lying on your back and do some hip flexion. So we're going to, Saran's going to lie down on her back, legs are nice and straight. From here, she's going to bend one knee up and just like so, up and down to the chest. So I'm going to do 10 on each leg on this one.
And if you're connecting this to someone playing, Nathan, what does this start to give you, or what does it start to work on?
We're looking at hip mobility. So if you imagine you flip Saran up onto her feet, that leg that she's moving now, that right leg, when it flexes up, is the position their front leg is going to be in if she's going into a long, deep lunge, in terms of flexion at the hip, flexion at the knee. So we're just getting that nice and mobile and ready to go, so that when we go into those sort of movements on court, it's not a shock to the body. The body's ready to repeat them.
And would this type of work also help with longevity? So being able to last a bit longer, because I know as you get older and a bit more worn out with the body, the hips are one of the things that really start to tighten and become sore, and then that creates the pain through the back and the sciatic type of stuff with the tightening. So does it help with sort of that maintenance?
Yeah, no, it does. Like as I said, with squash, glute work is, the glutes work a lot. So yeah, the hips go through a lot of movements, and yeah, they'll start to, like say, stiffen up. And as soon as the joint starts to stiffen up and you feel tight around there, it starts to affect other areas. And I think both of us can talk from experience in terms of stiffening up around the back due to our hips. So this will hopefully, the more mobility you manage to keep in yourself, will prolong your time on court and avoid the pain, hopefully. Fingers crossed. This one, we're going to, similar movement, but we're just going to move the hip in a slightly different direction. So you're going to start with a knee up, and you're going to let your knee drop out to the side as far as you can, and then back in. You may have noticed Saran has put her left hand on her hip straight away. What she's doing there is she's trying to feel when her right leg moves out, when her left hip starts to roll and follow it. We're trying to move it as far as we can without that other hip moving. So this shows that we're working that right hip and not just rolling through our lower back.
And it's a case of not forcing it, isn't it? Just working at the level that you're at rather than trying to strain or push it beyond that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think with a lot of people on this particular exercise, you find they either, as soon as they move that first leg, the hip just follows it straight away, or they're not getting very much movement at all. And you just work through it. So we call this hip dissociation. You'll be able to sort of move one hip separate to the other, which obviously on court is going to be pretty vital. So you work through it. So yeah, work to the range you've got, and then just the more you do it, the more mobile you're going to get with that hip, which again, in turn, like you said, on court, it's going to make you, it's going to be advantageous, because you're just going to be able to open up into your shots a lot easier. Cool. So hopefully once you've done these two, we've done the jogging and the crawling, you'll be a little bit warmer, and then the hips feel a little bit more mobile. We're going to start with some glute work. So we're going to stay on the floor to start with. So we're going to do an exercise called clams. So you're going to lie on your side, bend your knees forward so that your feet come in line with your hips. You want a nice straight line from shoulder through to hips and then through to your feet with your knees bent in front. From here, your top leg, your knees going to lift up into the air, keeping your heels together, and then go back down. I think key point to think about here is, as you can see with Saran, her top hip is staying on top, sorry, her right hip is staying on top of her left hip, but then in line. She's not rolling her hips backwards and forwards. So if I just come over to Saran, if you just, for this demonstration, if you let your hips roll backwards at the same time and open up and then go back down. If we're doing that, we're not actually working the glute. Again, we're just rolling through the lower back.
So should you be feeling this in the glute then? Should you be feeling like a tightness, or?
You should feel it's working.
Right.
We'll do 10 reps and then switch legs. Yeah, you should just feel like you should feel, it will start to come probably 8 towards the end of the set. It shouldn't feel too tight, and definitely shouldn't feel any sharp pain. It should just feel like it's starting to just work really and ache a little bit. This is one of the exercises you can actually progress in so many different ways, in terms of where you position the feet, where you position the top leg. And you could also band this up as well if you wanted to give it a bit more resistance. I think right now the main focus would be get as much range as you can whilst keeping that top hip still, and really focus on moving that glute. We're going to go into a second glute exercise. So from here, you're going to lie on your back. Feet are flat on the floor. So glute bridge, very simply, drive through your heels, thrust your hips up, and then come back down. Again, at the very top, you want to squeeze your glutes and just work on those glutes in a different range through hip extension, sorry, in this movement. As we said, with the amount of squatting and lunging that goes on court, the glutes go through a lot of work. So we're going to try and warm them up, get a lot of activation into them. And then in this session, it's just getting a bit of capacity in there as well, so that when you go onto court and start playing at high intensity for the first time, your glutes have been through some work. We're going to stay in that position, and this time Saran's going to lie down. So you're going to lift the hips up. From here, you're going to extend one leg, so lifting one foot off the floor, hold it for 5 seconds, and then switch your legs over whilst keeping your hips nice and high. This one's a little bit more challenging. We're working on this. We've got a bit of a hold on those glutes. You want to really try and keep the hips nice and square and high throughout the whole movement as you switch over. If it's a challenge, you could probably move your feet slightly further away and just lift so your base is a bit longer. So I'm just going to demonstrate that for a minute. And then you can lift your foot from there. And that makes it a little bit easier to bring it down. Or alternatively, you can just lift your foot slightly off the floor instead of extending the leg.
And then these fundamental movements will help to get you moving in and out off the ball and holding you in position when you're hitting your shot, as well as sort of getting yourself ready for the shock to the system, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. We all know how many lunges you do on court. So if your glutes don't have the capacity to do that, you'll start to fall down on that shot and just be less stable. And as I've heard you guys say many times to players, the more stable you are on that shot, the more accuracy you're going to have. So it's going to help you in those positions as well as prep you to be on court.
I know if I haven't been doing this sort of stuff, Nathan, I end up running through those front corners. I don't hold myself in a lunge at all. So I can do it around the back and the middle, but the front is another story.
Yeah, you get a lot of work when you go in extended positions. There's a lot of work through those glutes. So yeah, it's cool. The last one on this, and we're going to go back and redo these again. So we'll do these twice. We'll do some lateral walks. I'm trying to work out what one is here. You're going to squat down into a partial squat. Lead. So here you're going to go to a right. So you can lead with your right leg. Take a big step out. Bring the other leg towards it, keeping your feet hip width apart the whole time. It's another glute exercise. As you can see, we're targeting those glutes, getting some capacity in there.
And what does this do, Nathan?
Again, it's working. All these 4 exercises are working on training those glutes. Again, putting a bit of capacity in. But here, the legs moving just in a different motion, different plane. So if you look at the hip, it's a ball and socket joint, so it moves in all sorts of different directions, and it's all controlled around. The glutes play a big factor in that. So you want to be able to use them sort of work them in each range. And the stronger our glutes are, not only will that hold us in better positions on court in terms of through the strength of the glutes, it's also going to help protect the knee. So our strong glutes help hold a nice stable knee, and also they'll take more work off the hamstring. So 2 areas which can cause quite severe and drastic injuries. Stronger glutes help prevent those. So it's a bit twofold in terms of working the glutes in terms of specific to the court, but also general injury prevention.
And of course, squash is very much a multi-directional sport, isn't it? So you've got to be used to going in all sorts of directions, being sent the wrong way, and then having to sort of recover and stuff. So there's all sorts going on.
Yes, no, definitely. Which would all of them challenge the body. And then from here, we're going to start back again. So we'll go back to the clams.
How long would you expect to do this, Nathan?
In terms of time or days or weeks or sorry?
Or all of the above. I'd be interested in all of those facts.
If you're doing just an isolated glute session, I think like here, we've just got 4 exercises twice through. That would be okay in itself in a small session or part of a session. I'd say to our guys, we want to really be training those glutes 3-4 times a week. So sometimes that's as a warm up before they're in the gym, or warm up before they're court, or just at home. You've seen with these 4 exercises we've done. To be honest, you could be laying in front of the TV, watching some TV, working those glutes, and that's continuous. So these guys.
I mean, that's basically how I watch TV.
But just flipping your leg up and down, that's
just constant glute
revelation there. I'd say really, if you can aim to get a glute session in 3 times a week minimum, that's going to benefit you. And you just do that throughout whilst you're playing, and it's going to support you both on court and off court. And as these exercises get easier, you can just make them more challenging. This one with the glute bridge, again, we can put a band around the knees and open the knees up to put a bit more strain to the glutes. The walking lunge, the lateral walks, exactly the same.
And little and often really does accumulate and become very effective, doesn't it? So just throwing it into your warm up before you go on, and doing it a couple of times at night or in the morning, all those little bits accumulate to actually add up to something significant, I think is a big thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's within the S&C world, we call it microdosing. So you do a certain exercise or certain movement in small doses, but multiple times, either through the day or through the week. Use it a lot in terms of returning from injury, but with the glute stuff, it can work as activation before you're active, or like you say, when we're doing it in the evening before you go to bed, or just an extra session in the lunchtime. It's going to start building up your capacity. The more work capacity you've got in your glutes, just the more robust you're going to be, which the key word for anyone playing any sort of sport is robust as you possibly can. Once more through the lateral walks. Again, another one you can band. You can band it around the knees, band it around the ankles. Key focus would be just making sure you don't let the leg roll inwards and just keeping them, pulling them apart.
Again, that just adds a level of difficulty, doesn't it? The bands and
so it adds more resistance. So pushing against the band means you're going to with more resistance means you're going to have to work the muscle a bit more. It also will challenge you to keep if it's around your knees, keep your knees in a good alignment, and it's not going to fall in. So we're going to look at knee alignment in one of the exercises shortly, but we want those knees to follow the toes. And so by banding that up, it works there. We're working the glute again to do one of its functions and stabilize the knee. But yeah, like you say, offers more resistance. And with a band, we can go mini bands, you can go TheraBands, you can go big resistance bands, whichever adds a little bit more work. It all works. It's all good. It all works fine. So we should be feeling our glutes now. By sounds if you've had a session with Laura, your glutes have probably fallen off. So we're going to move on to some key movement patterns. The first one is a squat. Every S&C coach loves a squat. I mean, it's got so many different uses. But here, we're just going to do 10 simple bodyweight squats. And what we're going to do, we're going to pair each lower limb exercise with an upper body exercise as well. And we're going to do a shoulder stability exercise with it, which we'll show you in a minute. So start with just 10 squats, and we'll go through and we'll have a look at those. So I think key thing to think about for you guys, or for anyone really doing a squat, is initially go to the range you can do. Some people, you'll find some people can go really, really deep. You'll have other people that will probably keep their hips in line with their knees. So just go to the range you've got, and we can then start working through it. As long
Is there
as
ways of making it easier, Nathan? Is there ways of making it a little bit easier, or depending on where you're at?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways. So if you struggle to get depth because you've got really stiff ankles, you could, for example, put something underneath your heels, and that will actually help you get more depth. You can use TRX straps. You can hold onto a bar, hold onto a pole. You can even hold onto a partner if you're doing it partner, or in current times, someone in your household. But just to help you have a bit more stability in that sense, squat to a chair if you're at home, or squat to a box, so that you know the depth you go into, and it helps to give you a bit of guide. And then if you are struggling, you can have a little sit down and then stand back up. I've used all of those methods with multiple athletes. In fact, we've used 2 or 3 of them, I think, with Saran. I just realised Saran can't hear you. So Saran's done squats to boxes. She's done, we actually squat with weights under our heels a number of times as well. So it's, yeah, there's loads of ways you can adapt it. But to go to the key things are, if we do another set of, we'll come back on the key things with the squats, but there are a couple of key things in terms of stability. We'll add on to the shoulder exercise. So we're going to do what we call a push-up plus. So here, you're going to go into press-up position. We're going to keep our arms nice and straight. And the focus is we're going to let the chest drop to the floor and the shoulder blades come together and then push the chest all the way back up. So this is a key shoulder stability exercise. Helps control your scaps, your shoulder blades. Now with squash, you get there's a lot of anterior focus movements, so it's to help stabilize those shoulders and sort of counterbalance it. So it may not add too much to the gain, but actually, again, we're talking about longevity. It will help prolong your shoulder health. So it's a small movement, and sometimes it can take a little bit of time to get used to, but it is a useful one. We'll go back into the squats. We'll do 2 sets of this, and we'll talk about the key points here. I have 3 main key points. So if we start from the floor upwards, we're looking at the feet staying as flat as we possibly can. So we're not going to rock onto our toes. We're not going to roll our feet in or out. The knees are going to follow the toes, and the back's going to be straight. It's all around sort of being nice and stable and safe, really, to be honest. If your knees are falling inwards, you're going to put a lot more strain through your ligaments inside your knee. And the last thing we want to do is strain a ligament or tear or rupture one. And with the back, keeping it nice and straight, means it's going to, the spine's being looked after. We're not putting strains in unusual angles on that spine.
Would you say feet shoulder width apart with the squat?
Textbook wise, you'd say feet are slightly wider than shoulder width apart with your toes or your feet rotated to a 10 to 2 angle if you're using the clock face. If I'm completely honest, I think go what's comfortable. Some people will go a slightly wider stance, especially if you've got slightly tighter hips, then a wider stance might actually help you get a bit more depth. Some people like a much more narrow stance. So as long as you're hitting those key points, if your feet are flat, your knees are staying apart and following the line of your toes, and your back staying straight, I'm not overly fussed on the depth of the width of your foot stance, particularly in a bodyweight squat. But yeah, the standard one is sort of just slightly wider than hip width apart. Okay. Next one we're going to go into a split squat. So here we're going to go into like a split stance if you're in the lunge position. We're going to do a tempo version of this. So from here, you're going to lower your hips down and the back knee is going to go towards the floor, and you're going to take 5 seconds to go down. When you get to the bottom, you're going to hold it for 2 seconds, and then you're going to drive back up nice and fast and get back up in 1 second. So do 8 each leg. Again, we're looking at the same key points in terms of that front foot staying flat, that front knee staying in line with the toes, and the back is nice and straight. Or the spine is nice and straight. So you may have a slight angle through your hip, and that's okay as long as the spine is nice and straight.
So would it help if you could do this in front of a glass or a mirror so that you can see exactly whether you're staying lined up and seeing what the hip and the toe is doing in relation to each other?
Yeah, definitely. Even in the gym, you'll see people using the mirrors for the right reason, or using checking technique. But yeah, if you're new to these sort of movements, definitely use the mirror. It's great feedback. You want to make sure you're in that strong, stable position. The reason we add this sort of exercise in for a squash athlete, obviously we've already mentioned we do a lot of lunging. So by going slower, we're putting your body into that position for a little bit longer, and you've got to work to keep that knee nice and stable, whilst also working the quads on that front leg to take the strain on the way down and then drive back up. Realistically, the stronger your legs are, anteriorly especially, means when you go into the lunge, you can throw yourself explosively into those front corners particularly, and not just clatter straight through into the corner, into the wall. Yeah, strength is really important in squash. To me, for some people, it's massively underrated in the importance it has for each player.
And you want to make those lunges easy movements, don't you? The easier that movement is for you, the longer you can do it, the more you can do it, the quicker you can do it, the more you can focus on the quality of your hitting. Yeah,
definitely. It shouldn't, ideally, you want those movements to come in second nature so you can focus on what's actually you're on court to do, which is to hit the ball. So yeah, and the easier the movement is, the less fatiguing it becomes as well, because there's less sort of lost energy, should we say, in trying to control yourself from falling over. To pair up with this one, we're going to go what we call a reach through. So it's going to work on your T-spine mobility, so your thoracic mobility. Going to hands and knees, hips are about 90 degrees, hands directly under shoulders. You can take one hand up off the floor, reach underneath yourself, so your chest faces the wall, and then you're going to open up and lift the arm nice and high in the air, and let your chest face the other side. Try, as Saran is doing here, try and follow your arm with your head. So this one, we're trying to get a bit of mobility through that torso, really. Also just allow you, when you're going back on court, you've got free swinging motion. You don't want to be too stiff there, otherwise you're going to start just causing a bit more strain through the shoulder, or even again through the hip and the lower back. So just getting a nice bit of mobility through that thoracic area.
I like the fact that it's starting to connect your lower body to your upper body with your hitting and your movement, because it all has to flow and work together, doesn't it, when players are playing?
Yeah, definitely. We hear a lot from yourselves as coaches and the players in terms of that flow. So it's going like using the body to move yourself into the shot and using the shot to move yourself out of it. The more the body can support the shot, or your movements can support the shot, and the shot support your movement, everything is a lot more fluid and more efficient, really. So in this one, we're doing it 10 times each arm. And then we'll go back and repeat those tempo split squats. This is another exercise that could be thrown into one of your warm-ups. So if you are someone that is usually a bit stiff, particularly through your upper back when you're going onto court, this one is another good one that will just help loosen you up, ready to go. Cool. And we're back into the tempo split squats.
So which part of the warm-up would you add this into? So at what point would you put these exercises in? So
the warm-up, often you look at a warm-up and you follow, a lot of people will follow the acronym of RAMP, in terms of you do your pulse raiser first to get the heart going. Traditionally, people would do some activation work. So that would be some of the glute stuff we did earlier. And then maybe some band shoulder work that people do. If you've ever saw Nick Matthews do a warm-up, he has a lot of shoulder activation work with bands. So he's got some great exercises there. And then you'd go into the mobility work, which is where that reach through would come in. And then the final one, the P, is your potentiation or your performance part. So that'd be when it's more explosive, the higher speed work. For me, and for a lot of coaches now, we change it around a little bit. It follows a similar trend. So we do the ramp part to an extent. We do the raise first, and then we like to do some of the more passive mobility work. So I'd say a reach through is fairly passive. So we do that at the beginning, and like we did with the hip flexions and the hip opens today, that would have the reach throughs paired up. Then go into the activation work, and then we may go into some more dynamic mobility work, such as some walking lunges or some combination movements, such as a squat where you're reaching down, touching your toes, and then raising your arms up and then standing up. And then again, we'll go into that potentiation work. So in a squash sense, we'd do some jumping work, we'd do some sprints and acceleration work, and then into some ghosting, which would be the sort of the performance side of that warm-up, which moves you from just general movement to get warm all the way up to your really specific work that ties into what you're going to do on court.
Yeah, so all three of you have mentioned RAMP now as a sort of an acronym to use.
Yeah, it's probably one of those long-standing terms in fitness, in S&C. It's obviously carried over in sport now. It's a nice way of following it. It breaks it down so you know you're covering off all the bases. So the body, once you've done that warm-up, if you hit all of those components, you know it's going to be ready to play and ready to perform.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think we're coming to the last few reps, and we're going to go to the next exercise we're going to do is going to target the hamstrings. We're going to get the posterior part of the leg. Again, I mean, to be fair, we can't really find a part of the leg that doesn't get challenged in squash. But the hamstrings, again, the stronger they are, the better you are, the more stable you are in some of those longer positions, those longer lunges. So we'll look at those. It can be an exercise, the one we're going to do, that can leave a little bit of a fatigue, or something known as DOMS, when you load it up heavily in the gym. So just with hamstring work, just be careful and build it up gradually. Otherwise, you will be walking like a duck for the next day or two.
I'll tell you, it's incredible the hamstrings, how they get targeted and how you can isolate them and how badly it can hurt the next day.
You can tell when someone's had a big hamstring session, and it's always great when they come out the next day, go, oh, they're really stiff, really tight, I can't move. And you just chuckle because you know the day after is going to be worse. It's always
like
worse on the second
piano
day.
wire.
Yes. So here, what we're going to do is you're going to stand, feet roughly hip width apart, have a little knee flexion, but we're not going to bend those knees anymore. It's just you're going to keep that nice and still. And from here, you're going to push your hips back as far as you can. And when I say as far as you can, the restricting factor is going to be your hamstrings. So you're going to push your hips back as far as you can until you feel like hamstrings want to snap. They're not going to, trust me. But that's when you know you're working them. There's a couple of things. So go on, Lee.
I was just thinking this will give people another option to work the hamstrings rather than the very static stretch you see happening, or the bouncing stretch that you see, the very old school one. So I think this is definitely something that you want to be replacing it with.
Yes, I mean, to be honest, this is, although you'll feel a stretch, we're not stretching the muscle to try and increase its length. What we're doing, we're loading it eccentrically. So Saran's hamstrings here are working to slow her body down towards the floor. So in the gym, we could be holding a bar to load this up as well. And its eccentric strength has been linked really well to injury prevention. But yeah, so you want to put the loading through the hamstring. What people can do is they leave their hips still and they just bow forwards, and then it all comes through your lower back, which is not what we're after. From this one, nice simple one, a bit of strength work, we're going to do press ups. If you can't do, so with the RDLs, you just did 10 on each, 10 there. The press ups are going to do, for today, 6 to 10. What you can do, if you're struggling, I mean, Saran's got some good press ups, you can drop down to your knees. And if you are going to do knee press ups, I think one key thing to think about is your hips need to move with your shoulders at the same time. We're not just flexing the hips and bowing down, because you won't get any benefit out of that. So you can put your knees down and then move your shoulders slightly further forward with your hands and allow yourself to come down and back up and pivot off those knees. So we'll repeat that again, so back into those RDLs. If unloaded, they're feeling quite easy, slow it down. So this time Saran's going to take around 8 seconds, if you can, to get down. And that just increases what we call time under tension, increases the amount of time that hamstring is put under tension and loaded, which then just puts a little bit more work through it. So you can see that Saran's back's nice and straight. So the tension and the hips are moving backwards. The tension's all been taken and the work's been taken through the hamstring and not through her lower back.
It's so easy to want to rush through these, isn't it? Whereas actually, like you said, the benefit comes in the time under tension. So just making sure that you are very slow and considered with what you're doing. Again, the position right. Yeah,
definitely. I think one of my key philosophies is technique is king. Technique is key, whichever way you want to say it. Is if you get your technique right, you're going to build really strong foundations. If you, like you said, if you rush through it and your technique's all over the shop, you may be a little bit stronger in certain areas and you may be able to do certain movements, but you're also building foundations on sand, and you're going to really struggle at some point because you're not going to be prepared for it. Like today's session is obviously a little bit slower than some of the, say, squash circuits you might see and be used to, but it's all about, like I said, building those foundation and fundamental movements to get back on court. Everyone was going to rush back into their sport. We've seen it across multiple sports through this, unfortunately, this last 12 months. So we've been really key within, so put a lot of effort in squash to try and make sure people are ready when they get back onto court, all the way from the top guys as well. That's what we're going to finish there in terms of the lower body work. In terms of, we've covered some glute work, we've done a bit of sort of strength into our key movements in terms of the squats and split squats, and then some hamstring work with the RDLs. We're going to finish that session off, or this session off now, with some core work. Keep it nice and simple, and we're going to start with a plank. So here we're going to hold the plank just for 30 seconds. Each exercise we're going to do for 30 seconds. You can go on a low plank like Saran's doing now in terms of going on her forearms, or if you find it more comfortable, you can go into a high plank or press up position and just hold in that position there. Saran's going to drop into that. She's going to lower her hips slightly. You want to try and keep your hips in line with your shoulders. Some people will be tempted and put their hips nice and high, which then just deloads the trunk a little bit. Others will drop their hips really low. So just for demonstration, Saran, just drop your hips nice and low. And that puts a lot of strain for your lower back. So you want to keep the hips up and keep your core tight. If you want to make it a little bit harder, you're going to squeeze your glutes. And then also, with Saran's hands, you can see they're nice and relaxed. I call it white knuckling. What we don't want to do is squeeze our knuckles really tight. What that does, it tenses up the shoulder and just, again, deloads the trunk, and it doesn't get as much benefit from it as you're after. Do 10 more seconds.
And this is another really good total body exercise, isn't it, as well? That's the other thing. It's working the whole sort of trunk.
Yes, we're going to roll into a side plank. Pretty much the same, just on one arm. Yeah, it's working that trunk, but also there's a bit of shoulder stability in there as well on the plank. On this one, if you, again, on your forearm or on your hand, and then if you want to go high or low, it's to fair a lot of about comfort. If you find this a real challenge, you could drop down to your knees and rest your knees on the floor, but keep your hips off. And it just slightly takes a little bit of weight off it, a little bit of load, and makes it a little bit more comfortable and easier. I would say do that and drop to your knee, opposed to holding a poor position. And we'll do it 5 more seconds. I was talking, I've lost track of the time. And we're going to roll over onto the other arm. Because with the hold, or with core, again, it's like we said, good technique, good positioning. You're going to train the muscles to support you the way you want them to. Whereas if you just get into awkward angles, it's not going to work the way you want to. So it's better to slightly regress a movement to make you do it properly in good form, than to try and keep it at a tougher level, but not do it as well. 10 more seconds. Okay, next exercise is called the lectures. So from here, you're going to lie on your back. Your arms are going to be past your head, and your legs are going to be, your arms past your head. That's it, legs are going to be straight. And then you're going to bend your knees up towards your chest and bring your arms up past towards your knees. And then you're going to just extend them both out at the same time. And we do a lot of, well, with the guys I work with, we do a lot of trunk work, a lot of core work. Again, we're going to do this in 30 seconds. It just helps stabilize yourself in that position on the ball. If your trunk is weak, you're more likely to, as you go into an extended shot, you can't hold that torso up. And that's where you're looking at, you see people constantly putting their hand on the floor or falling through a shot. So it makes it a little bit tougher. So again, trying to tie it into what you guys do on court. And then another 5 seconds, and then we'll do one more. Cool. And then we're going to go into a Russian twist. So here's, you're going to sit on the floor, lift your feet off, and then you're going to rotate your torso so your shoulders line up in between your knees, and then rotate back the other way. Saran's making it a little bit easier by crossing her feet. So she uncrosses them, so you can make it even harder. Or to make it a bit easier, again, you put feet on the floor and rotate if you're struggling with that. To find a level that suits you. I think with the trunk work, what we try and do is always have different style of movement. So we've had a hold, we've had a lateral hold, maybe on the side, we had a bit of a flexion, and we've also had a rotation. So keep it mixed up. It just, again, works the trunk through multiple planes. Cool. And then we've got one more, sorry. So going back into that lying down position, similar to the leg movements, but we're going to work in a diagonal motion here. So arms are going to start up, legs are going to start up, and then you're going to extend one arm past and the opposite leg at the same time, and then alternate the sides. This is working sort of the cross chain here on the trunk. Again, if you want to make these harder, you can add a bit of load. So on these ones, you could hold something heavier in your hand. Same with the ellipses, you can hold a bit of a plate. So yeah, I would say for trunk work, it's more about the time that you do it for, opposed to the weight that you load it with. This is our last exercise. So we'll do 2 more on each side.
And again, it's all about control, isn't it, when you're doing this?
Yeah, it is. It's for when you lay down, it's trying to control that lower back. So try and not let it arch too much. Keep it nice and controlled. If that is happening, just don't extend out as far for those sort of movements. But yeah, we're looking at controlled. It's all about, like I say, controlling that trunk on those movements. And that's with trunk work. We'll probably just do another circuit of those a couple of times through. Just give yourself a little bit more work, but we'll go a bit easy today and not do too many reps. Otherwise, again, every time you sneeze or cough, you're going to be in a bit of pain.
No, I mean it's really good and so valuable. I think, like you said, it's about making the athlete robust. It's about getting the body ready to do what you need to do on a squash court, and just by accumulating little bits, it's going to build up and get you ready, isn't it, for the return?
Yeah, definitely. And you want to do that progressively. So we've gone 2 sets of each exercise today, and then the core just 1 set. You could, if you were going to follow this session a few times, you could, and it felt comfortable after the first time, you could then start adding an extra setting of a couple of the exercises and just increase the volume progressively as you go. And that's going to help your body adapt even quicker. But yeah, last thing you want to do is rush in and do too much straight away, or you'll go on court once. You might not even make it to court, to be honest. You'll be in too much pain. So
yeah, well, that's brilliant. So thank you very much, Nathan, and Saran, of course. I mean, it's a great insight to get, especially as you're working with all these top athletes as well. To get that information is just brilliant. So thank you very much.
No worries. Cheers, Lee. Cheers, guys.
Well, that actually leads on really nicely to our next session planned for you guys, which is going to be on Thursday at 6 o'clock with Tanya Bailey. She'll be working with another one of our young up-and-coming players, Asia Harris. So really looking forward to that one. It's going to be about connecting the lower body with the upper body, getting it all to flow. So I've just seen that there is the link to sign up for the next session on Thursday. You can do that via the SQUASHfit hub. Of course, you want to revisit this session and see exactly what Nathan had to say, and to go through it again, you can also catch up with that on demand. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. That pretty much concludes what we've got here this evening. So from myself, Saran, and from Nathan, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on Thursday at 6 o'clock for more SQUASHfit, brought to you by England Squash. See you then.